Thanks for joining us for The Bard's Truth with yours truly, the Green Bard.
This is Part 4, Episode 1 of our Direwolves of Winterfell series, investigating Bran and Summer's bond in A Game of Thrones. If you haven't listened to the prior parts of this series, you may want to check them out now. As a primer, consider this SSM. Question:
Are all the Stark children wargs/skin changers with their wolves?
George.
To a greater or lesser degree, yes, but the amount of control varies widely.
Question:
Yes, I know that Lady is dead, but assuming that they were all alive and all the children as well, would all the wolves have bonded to the kids as Bran and Summer did?
George.
Bran and Summer are somewhat of a special case.
In this essay, we'll investigate how Bran and Summer are a special case. My hypothesis is that theirs may be the strongest bond simply because Bran is the strongest telepath of the group.
Bran is the first and only Stark thus far in the story with power to consciously enter the wolf and control his action. Arya actively uses a cat's vision, but has yet to demonstrate full control or to consciously enter Nymeria.
She did perhaps exert her will in compelling Nymeria to save Catelyn from the river, but that was a partially subconscious act in a dream.
Thus far, Ghost is in charge in all of Jon's wolf dreams, although Jon does now remember them and realizes that they are real. This essay is a line-by-line investigation of every mention of Summer in the text, including the wolf dreams and every thought Bran has inside the wolf. In the first volume, we see how their bond initially develops similarly to the other Stark direwolf connections,
but how Bran's powers develop faster due to his coma, the ministrations of other actors in his dreams, and his immobility, which seems to drive him to use his connection to Summer more than his siblings do.
We see in the second volume how Bran realizes that his wolf dreams are real, and through the sensory deprivation in the crypts, how he develops the ability to enter his wolf consciously. In the third volume, we see him develop this skill to a point where he can save Jon's life even.
But we also see him follow a dark path using this power over Hodor.
In the latest volume, we see how, under the tutelage of Bloodraven, he can use the power to enter ravens and finally to enter the collective consciousness of the Weirwood Net. The development of these powers is unique to Bran among his siblings. He's a Greenseer. While many other bloggers are wondering about and investigating foreshadowing of Bran King, I'll be focusing purely on his magical growth and his relationship to Summer.
So you'll have to look for your Bran as the future king hype elsewhere.
We also get some direct wolf thoughts from Summer about the bond to the other direwolves. We learn that he periodically senses his siblings. This does seem to differ from a dream Jon has where Ghost seems to more strongly, certainly more vividly, sense his remaining littermates. We also learn how neither wolf can sense the others when one of them is on the other side of the wall. We can assume that something about the magic of the wall disrupts their connection. Finally, several themes from our prior volumes continue here with Summer and his bond to Bran, including mirroring Bran's personality and intelligence, obedience versus independence, shadowing/protecting/healthy fear of the wolves, related the wolves' innate ability to sense threats, belonging to the pack/the instinct to hunt, being affectionate when they're together, and finally, bad things happening when they're separated. Many of these themes are more visible in Bran and Summer given our access to wolf dreams in the POV and the strength of their bond. One other theme that is pervasive in Bran specifically is his wish to be in a whole body. It shows up in his anger and shame at being called a cripple or pity. It shows up in his penchant for staying way too long inside Summer's skin. It shows up in his unfortunate choice to repeatedly invade Hodor's body. It shows up in his reasoning for going to the Three-Eyed Crow. It will be interesting to see if he finally accepts his own skin to some degree in the coming volumes. A Game of Thrones, A Pup with No Name, and Bran the Broken. In this volume, we see how the bond between Bran and Summer forms immediately and strongly, then strengthens with further contact between the two and with Bran's increasing powers. Summer, indeed, is an integral part of Bran's prophetic dreams in this volume, suggesting that he is somewhat aware of them through the bond. A Game of Thrones, Bran 1. We see that the bond to Summer began forming immediately, the moment Jon hands him to Bran.
The mirroring begins in the very next moment.
He's dismayed at the idea that the pups would be slaughtered, saying, "It's mine." At the same time, Summer squirms, seemingly feeling Bran's emotions. Bran gave the pup a quick, nervous stroke, then turned as Jon said, "Here you go." His half-brother put a second pup into his arms. There are 5 of them. Bran sat down in the snow and hugged the wolf pup to his face. Its fur was soft and warm against his cheek. Later that chapter. "No matter," said Hullen. "They be dead soon enough." Bran gave a wordless cry of dismay. The sooner the better, the young Greyjoy agreed. He drew his sword. Give the beast here, Bran. The little thing squirmed against him as if it heard and understood. No! Bran cried out fiercely. It's mine! Later in the chapter. Bran looked to his Lord Father for rescue, but got only a frown, a furrowed brow. Hullen speaks truly, son. Better a swift death than a hard one from the cold and starvation. No! He could feel tears welling in his eyes, and he looked away. He did not want to cry in front of Father. So now Jon steps in to selflessly advocate for his pack. This shows a lot about Jon and Bran's relationship. Bran loved Jon with all his heart for his selfless act in not including himself in the count for a pup. This is an indication of the empathy that both boys possess. Bran knows what it cost Jon. He can feel how it must hurt to exclude himself.
Fortunately, our author rewards Jon later with Ghost. He's not always heartless.
At the end of the passage, we see how Summer mirrors Bran's emotions again, squirming at Bran's relief that the pups wouldn't be killed. Lord Stark, Jon said. It was strange to hear him call Father that, so formal. Bran looked at him with desperate hope. There are 5 pups, he told Father. 3 male, 2 female. What of it, Jon? You have 5 true-born children, Jon said. 3 sons, 2 daughters. The direwolf is the sigil of your house. Your children were meant to have these pups, my lord. Bran saw his father's face change, saw the other men exchange glances. He loved Jon with all his heart at that moment. Even to 7, Bran understood what his brother had done. The count had come right only because Jon had admitted himself. He had included the girls, even included Rickon, the baby, but not the bastard who wore the surname Snow, the name that custom decreed be given to all those in the north unlucky enough to be born with no name of their own. Their father understood as well. You want no pup for yourself, Jon? He asked softly. The direwolf graces the banners of House Stark, Jon pointed out. I am no Stark, father. Their lord father regarded Jon thoughtfully. Robb rushed into the silence he left. I will nurse him myself, father, he promised. I will soak a towel with warm milk and give him suck from that. Me too, Bran echoed. The lord weighed his sons long and carefully with his eyes. Easy to say, harder to do. I will not have you wasting the servants' time with this. If you want these pups, you will feed them yourselves. Is that understood? Bran nodded eagerly. The pup squirmed in his grasp, licked at his face with a warm tongue. Later that chapter. It was not until they were mounted and on their way that Bran allowed himself to taste the sweet air of victory. By then his pup was snuggled inside his leathers, warm against him, safe for the long ride home. Bran was wondering what to name him. Note the indecision Bran has in naming the pup in both his first and second chapters. I'm not sure if this will end up being a character flaw, or if it was just a device the author used to place significance on the name Summer for some yet-to-be-revealed reason. Either way, we'll monitor Bran for future indecision. But the main takeaway from that last chapter is the immediate bond formation and mirroring between Bran and Summer. A Game of Thrones, Bran 2. In the next chapter, we get a hint of an independent streak in Summer's lack of interest in chasing sticks. This is an example of personality mirroring because Bran is independent himself, as evidenced by his own disobedience in choosing to climb even after it was forbidden. He turned and ran off before Hodor and the other stable boys could see the tears in his eyes. That was the end of his farewells. Instead, Bran spent the morning alone in the Godswood, trying to teach his wolf to fetch a stick and failing. The wolfling was smarter than any of the hounds in his father's kennel, and Bran would have sworn he understood every word that was said to him, but he showed very little interest in chasing sticks. He was still trying to decide on a name. Robb was calling his Grey Wind because he ran so fast. Sansa had named hers Lady, and Arya named hers after some old witch queen in the songs, and little Rickon called his Shaggydog, which Bran thought was a pretty stupid name for a direwolf. Jon's wolf, the white one, was Ghost. Bran wished he had thought of that first, even though his wolf wasn't white. He had tried 100 names in the last fortnight, but none of them sounded right. A Game of Thrones, Tyrion 1. After Bran's fall, we first hear of Summer from Tyrion. Summer has been howling a lot. We learn here that there must be something about his bond to Summer that is helping to save Bran's life, specifically in the anecdote that Bran weakened when he could no longer hear the wolf. We also see Cersei's possible recognition of the magic of the wolves, coupled with her complete antipathy toward the wolf,
foreshadowing her unjust death sentence for Lady.
The gods alone know, Tyrion told her. The maester only hopes. He chewed some more bread. I would swear that wolf is keeping the boy alive. The creature is outside his window day and night, howling. Every time they chase it away, it returns. The maester said they closed the window once to shut out the noise, and Bran seemed to weaken. When they opened it again, his heart beat stronger. The queen shuddered. There is something unnatural about those animals, she said. They are dangerous. I will not have any of them coming south with us. A Game of Thrones, Catelyn 3. During Bran's coma, Summer becomes a hero in saving both Cat and Bran from the catspaw. First, though, he's heard in the yard howling with Grey Wind and Shaggy, pack behavior. Summer is worrying for Bran, and the other two are howling in solidarity. This seemed to happen a lot, as there was also evidence of it in Tyrion's chapter. One can guess that Summer wished to be in the room with Bran, that this separation was troubling him greatly. Perhaps he felt some of the pain Bran might have been in during the coma.
Outside the tower, a wolf began to howl. Catelyn trembled, just for a second.
Bran's.
Robb opened the window and let the night air into the stuffy tower room. The howling grew louder. It was a cold and lonely sound, full of melancholy and despair. Don't, she told him. Bran needs to stay warm.
He needs to hear them sing,
Robb said. Somewhere out in Winterfell, a second wolf began to howl in chorus with the first. Then a third, closer.
Shaggydog and Grey Wind,
Robb said, and their voices rose and fell together.
You can tell them apart if you listen close. During the catspaw's fire, Summer is not drawn away. Mayhaps he smelled or heard the catspaw and tracked him to Bran's room, or he was just taking his chance to sneak up to Bran's room. A fun tinfoily explanation is that Summer heard what was going on through Bran's ears and rushed up for the save. Unfortunately, there is zero evidence for this. The result is the same. Bran and Catelyn are saved, and it is undoubtedly Summer's bond to Bran that enables it. This is also the reader's first indication of the deadly ferocity of these wolves, a stark example of their protective nature, and ample reason for fear for those who would do them harm.
Catelyn saw the shadow slip through the open door behind him. There was a low rumble, less than a snarl, the merest whisper of a threat. But he must have heard something, because he started to turn just as the wolf made its leap. They went down together, half sprawled over Catelyn where she'd fallen. The wolf had him under his jaw. The man's shriek lasted less than a second before the beast wrenched back its head, taking out half of its throat. His blood felt like warm rain as it sprayed across her face. The wolf was looking at her. Its jaws were red and wet, and its eyes glowed golden in the dark room. It was Bran's wolf, she realized. Of course it was. Thank you, Catelyn whispered, her voice faint and tiny. She lifted her hand, trembling. The wolf padded closer, sniffed at her fingers, then licked at the blood with a wet, rough tongue. When it had cleaned all the blood off her hand, it turned away silently and jumped up on Bran's bed and lay down beside him. Catelyn began to laugh hysterically.
In the aftermath of the attack, we see affection and shadowing. Summer did start this section protesting his separation from Bran, so all 5 of our themes are in evidence in just a small section of this chapter. A Game of Thrones, Bran 3. We won't go into detail about Bran's dreams during the coma, save to note that the coma seems to have triggered an awakening of Bran's magical powers. This probably plays a role in the Warg bond developing sooner in him than in the other Stark POVs. We can be less sure of what happens for Robb and Rickon. At the end of the dream, at Bran's awakening, Summer is again at Bran's side and being affectionate. And then there was movement beside the bed, and something landed lightly on his legs. He felt nothing. A pair of yellow eyes looked into his own, shining like the sun. His window was open, and it was cold in the room. But the warmth that came off the wolf enfolded him like a hot bath. His pup, Bran realized. Or was it? He was so big now. He reached out to pet him, his hand trembling like a leaf. When his brother Robb burst into the room, breathless from his dash up the tower steps, the direwolf was licking Bran's face. Bran looked up calmly. His name is Summer, he said. So Bran finally settled on the name Summer, an homage to Old Nan, and possibly foreshadowing by our author about the end of our story. A Game of Thrones, Bran 4. Speaking of Old Nan, in the next chapter, Bran's impatience with her, certainly a beloved figure, belies Bran's growing discontent over his immobility. He wants to be out there with Summer in the pack, running and playing, but all he can do is watch from a window. Summer is a bit outcast from the other two as well, trailing and observing, mirroring Bran's separation. We also get Bran's opinion on Summer's attentiveness and intelligence, possibly mirroring as well. Bran watched from his window seat. Wherever the boy went, Grey Wind was there first, loping ahead to cut him off, until Rickon saw him, screaming in delight, and went pelting off in another direction. Shaggydog ran at his heels, spinning and snapping if the other wolves came too close. His fur had darkened until it was all black. His eyes were green fire. Bran's Summer came last. He was silver and smoke, with eyes of yellow gold that saw all there was to see. Smaller than Grey Wind and more wary, Bran thought he was the smartest of the litter. He could hear his brother's breathless laughter as Rickon dashed across the hard-packed earth on little baby legs. Later. I don't care whose stories they are, Bran told her. I hate them. He didn't want stories, and he didn't want old Nan. He wanted his mother and father. He wanted to go running with Summer loping beside him. He wanted to climb the broken tower and feed corn to the crows. He wanted to ride his pony again with his brothers. He wanted it to be the way it had been before. Next, we have the attack on Tyrion. The wolves clearly act as a pack in a coordinated fashion. However, there's an oddity in this scene. Summer led the attack, not Grey Wind, even though Robb was the one showing aggressiveness to Tyrion, and Bran was seemingly happy about the saddle plans. If it were mirroring, shouldn't Grey Wind be the main aggressor? Upon reflection, I believe it was a combination of protection and mirroring that drove this attack. A tip of the hat to Frey Family Reunion on Westeros.org for helping me flesh out this idea. Under this interpretation, Summer being the leader makes perfect sense. First, Bran was more upset than he admits to himself at Tyrion's repeatedly calling him a cripple. Second, the Lannisters threw Bran from the tower. Bran's subconscious knows. Summer was there. Summer knows. Summer smelled Lannister. Tyrion has a Lannister scent. Theon hits it on the head in the second paragraph that follows. The door to the yard flew open. Sudden light came streaming across the hall as Rickon burst in, breathless. The direwolves were with him. The boys stopped by the door, wide-eyed, but the wolves came on. Their eyes found Lannister, or perhaps they caught his scent. Summer began to growl first. Grey Wind picked it up. They padded toward the little man, one from the right and one from the left. The wolves do not like your smell, Lannister, Theon Greyjoy commented. Perhaps it's time I took my leave, Tyrion said. He took a step backward, and Shaggydog came out of the shadows behind him, snarling. Lannister recoiled, and Summer lunged at him from the other side. He reeled away, unsteady on his feet, and Grey Wind snapped at his arm, teeth ripping at his sleeve and tearing loose a scrap of cloth. No, Bran shouted from the high seat as Lannister men reached for their steel. Summer, here, Summer, to me. The direwolf heard the voice, glanced at Bran and again at Lannister. He crept backwards, away from the little man, and settled down below Bran's dangling feet. Robb had been holding his breath. He let it out with a sigh and called, Grey Wind! His direwolf moved to him, swift and silent. Now there was only Shaggydog, rumbling at the small man, his eyes burning like green fire. Rickon, call him! Bran shouted to his baby brother, and Rickon remembered himself and screamed, Home, Shaggy! Home now! The black wolf gave Lannister one final snarl and bounded off to Rickon, who hugged him tightly around the neck. Fortunately, the wolves all broke off the attack when called, Summer less obedient than Grey Wind. Under my theory, Summer must have sensed Lannister in the hall with the boys and decided it was danger, given the history. He would have riled up Shaggy and Grey Wind at the door to the hall until Rickon decided to let them in. Robb is already upset, so Grey Wind is mirroring him. Same for Shaggy because Rickon's always upset, as we learn elsewhere in the story. As if to reinforce this potential cause of Summer's actions, Bran has a dream later this chapter about Jaime's attack on him. In this light, Summer was mirroring Bran's subconscious feelings about Lannisters. In the dream, Bran denies seeing what he saw between Cersei and Jaime, but it was no good. He subconsciously knows that he was in danger from the Lannisters. This dream is all about Bran and his realization that his subconscious and his bond to Summer may have caused the attack on Tyrion, in my opinion. In his dream, he was climbing again, pulling himself up an ancient windowless tower, his fingers forcing themselves between blackened stones, his feet scrabbling for purchase. Higher and higher he climbed, through the clouds and into the night sky, and still the tower rose before him. When he paused to look down, his head swam dizzily and he felt his fingers slipping. Bran cried out and clung for dear life. The earth was 1,000 miles beneath him and he could not fly. He could not fly. He waited until his heart had stopped pounding, until he could breathe, and he began to climb again. There was no way to go but up. Far above him, outlined against a vast pale moon, he thought he could see the shapes of gargoyles. His arms were sore and aching, but he dared not rest. He forced himself to climb faster. The gargoyles watched him ascend. Their eyes glowed red as hot coals in a brazier. Perhaps once they had been lions, but now they were twisted and grotesque. Bran could hear them whispering to each other in soft stone voices terrible to hear. He must not listen, he told himself. He must not hear. So long as he did not hear them, he was safe. But when the gargoyles pulled themselves loose from the stone and padded down the side of the tower to where Bran clung, he knew he was not safe at all. I didn't hear.
He wept as they came closer and closer. I didn't!
It's apparent to me from this dream that Bran has a subconscious mistrust, fear of the Lannisters, which he shares with Summer through the bond. Together with Summer's protective instinct
and Bran's anger at repeatedly being called a cripple,
this leads to the near attack on Tyrion. This denial seems to be a foreshadowing of Bran's denial that his anger caused Summer to attack Meera and Jojen in a mirroring fashion in A Clash of Kings. Just as Bran now denies the knowledge of the Lannisters throwing him from the window, he later denies that he caused the attack on the Reeds,
when Summer mirrors his mood about Jojen's accusations.
Later, there are more mentions of Summer in this chapter, all examples of how he's Bran's constant and affectionate companion.
Summer followed them up the tower steps. Later, Summer, he called. The wolf bounded up on the bed. Bran hugged him so hard he could feel the hot breath on his cheek. I can ride now, he whispered to his friend. We can go hunting in the woods soon. Wait and see.
Later,
Summer snatched table scraps from Bran's hand.
Later,
Robb carried Bran up to bed himself. Grey Wind led the way, and Summer close behind. Please join us next time when we conclude our analysis of Summer and Bran in A Game of Thrones.
Thanks to all the terrific artists who let me use their work on this YouTube video. Thanks as always to my family, in this case to my mother for the voiceover and my daughter for the art. If you enjoyed this content, you can also consider supporting us on Patreon.